Hi everybody, it's Alyce-Kay Ruckelshaus from Threshold of Hineni, here for another craft table chat. I'm sorry that I haven't posted in a little while because I've been working on my Abraham journal tutorials, and so we've been filling this baby up with pockets and all kinds of fun stuff. And I've taken a break now from this because I'm waiting. I've been having problems with trying to figure out how to position the camera and everything. I've got it hanging suspended from a clothes rack right now, and it kind of swings a little bit, and that's not good. And I haven't been able to control which direction it's filming from. In fact, right now I think it's filming vertically. But since you don't really need to be able to see what I'm doing, that doesn't matter a whole lot. So that's okay. But on the crafting things, the tutorials, they need to be able to see what I'm doing. And so I did a little research, because I thought, oh, it'll be hundreds of dollars to get a setup, and I can't afford that. I just don't have any budget. But a gal donated some money to me, and that was so, so sweet. God put on her heart to give some money to a woman who has ministry that doesn't have a nonprofit, and so she chose me, and and it wasn't very much, but I know that it was a lot for her because she's a single mom, and so it really blessed me. And so my husband said, research and find out how much it would cost to get whatever you need, which I didn't even know what I needed to be able to take videos this way. I've still got it. It might be swinging a little bit because I haven't gotten this yet from Amazon. It's supposed to come today. So I looked, and it's really not that expensive to get a mic stand and then an attachment that can hang out over where I'm filming, an attachment for the phone. So I'm just waiting for that to come. I'm so excited. Anyway, in the meantime, hopefully you guys can handle any little swinging that there is and the poor orientation. I'm going to press flowers while I talk, okay? And I was reading I was reading Philippians today. I love Philippians. It's one of my favorite books of the Bible. And today I was reading in chapter 1 because I've just started it again. And Paul, the verse that struck me, well, let me back up a little bit. If you haven't watched very many of my videos, then you might not know this. My favorite way to have devotions is to read and just ask God to stop me when he gets me to something that I need to really, really pay attention to. Of course, I try to pay attention to everything that I read in the Bible, but sometimes there's something that God wants to draw our attention to more than others. And so and I got that idea from Evelyn Christensen in a book called Lord Change Me, and I'll try to remember to link it below. It's a really good book. Needless to say, that book changed my life. I read it, I think I was in high school when I read it, maybe college, but I'm pretty sure I was in high school. And it just really impacted me. It was just really helpful. And so ever since then, this isn't how I exclusively do my devotions, but it's how I do them quite often. So I'll just read, and sometimes God will stop me after a verse. Sometimes I'll read a couple chapters. I never know exactly what he's going to do. And I know this is kind of weird that I'm doing this in a notebook, but a year ago we moved all of our stuff up to a house in the mountains that we're working on finishing. We bought it like partially finished, and but we don't have the money to work on it right now, so we haven't gotten very far. But anyway, so we thought we were moving up there a year ago, and then at the last minute the deal fell through on this house here that we're living in. The house up there is already paid for, so that's not a problem. But anyway, so we moved all of our stuff up there, and it costs a lot to move, and it's a pain. So everything's been up there for a year, and so I went out and pulled all these leaves off of trees and picked some flowers that I want to press, and came inside and realized I don't have any big books to press them in. So I'm going to try putting them in a dictionary, and then put a bunch of stuff on top of, not a dictionary, what do I have here? A notebook, and then try putting a bunch of stuff on top of them, and hopefully that will work. We will see. Do I want to just keep this off hold? I don't know. Anyway, so I'm reading in Philippians 1 today, And the place that God stopped me was, he stopped me several places, but the first place he stopped me was at verse 6. And I used to have this memorized, but my memory is not so good anymore, as you know, and so I may misquote it slightly, but I know that I'll get the right idea. He who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. And the context is that Paul is talking to them about how they've labored with him in the faith, and that he prays for them with joy because of how they've labored with him in the faith. And he's confident of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. And it might say until the day of Christ Jesus or something like that. I'm not sure. Anyway, okay, so first of all, kind of a funny story. My fourth daughter, I carried for 10 months before she was born. And I was having her at home, and I knew quite a few people in the home birthing community in our area, and everybody said, oh, don't worry, it's, I've had some blah 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 many moms who have gone for 10 or 11 months without any problem. And I'm thinking, hello, that's not exactly encouraging. I mean, yeah, the not any problem part is, but you could go 11 months or 10 months. That was kind of freaking me out. Okay, that's just part of a pedal, but we'll try it anyway. And anyway, so I ended up carrying her for almost exactly 10 months. And it was kind of funny because towards the end of my pregnancy, there's not much room left in there. And so she didn't have much room to move around. And that's kind of common from what I understand, that towards the end of your pregnancy, a lot of times babies won't move as much. At least that was my common experience with my other kids, who were also post dates, but none of them were that far. I think 2 weeks was the farthest they had gone before. And anyway, but she was to the point where she was hardly moving at all. And if I drank some orange juice or something, then she would move a little bit, but there just wasn't much room there. And I started thinking that maybe I wasn't really pregnant, that maybe I had just wanted to be pregnant, and so I had convinced myself I was pregnant and had put on the weight and everything that you would with a pregnancy, but that I wasn't really pregnant. It was really funny because I hadn't seen a doctor in the whole time, so I hadn't had an ultrasound or a Doppler, or heard the baby's heartbeat or anything like that you would have normally and be able to know for sure that the baby's there and okay and stuff. And so I did have a home pregnancy test, but anyway, so I don't know, I kind of convinced myself that there wasn't really a baby in there and that I was just making it up, and somehow I had to get over it so that I could stop feeling like I was pregnant. And I had been pretty sick through that pregnancy too. I had had a couple of months where I was pretty much in bed. And anyway, so I was doing my devotions that day, and I read this verse, Philippians 1:6, where Paul says, he who began a good work in you, get that right, because the baby's in you. He who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. And I don't know, it was totally out of context for the scripture, of course, because Paul wasn't talking about pregnant women, but it still really spoke to me that God was going to complete this pregnancy, and that it wouldn't last forever, and that everything was in his time. And I can't remember exactly how long it was after that, but it wasn't very long. It might have been like the next day or a couple days later that she was finally born. We had a church meeting in our home at the time, and I don't know if it's okay to say this or not, but I had my bloody show on Saturday. And so, pretty sure that's going to happen within the next 24 hours. So we had called my birth team and said, you want to come for church tomorrow? Because baby's probably going to be born. And I was like an hour and a half to 2 hours away from everybody on my birth team. And so they all came and everything. And then my best friend and I went for a walk, and my water broke, and that's all she wrote. So, but anyway, that's my kind of funny story about that verse. But that verse, I don't know, it just really spoke to me today. At first, I was like, okay, God, why are you showing me this verse? Because I always want to know why he is showing it to me. And sometimes it's really evident. I mean, sometimes as soon as I read it, I'm like, oh my goodness, wow, And other times, I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to get from this? And then it takes more time of prayer and everything. And today, God was just talking to me about how, there's certain things that he's told me to do, and I don't know how to do them. Like this whole thing, I just thought of this just now. Like the whole thing with the filming, the camera orientation and everything that I was telling you I was having problems with, and I didn't know how to do that, and I didn't know how much it would cost. I kind of assumed it'd be like $200 or $300. It ended up being $40 that it cost, which was still out of our budget, so it doesn't matter that I didn't check it out sooner. But and hopefully this will work. I don't think it's going to be a permanent solution, but it'll be good enough for a while to help me figure out where I would want to position a permanent solution. So, what do I say? Anyway, so it's like, it's just stuff like that it's like God's called you to do something, and, you might feel a little discouraged that you don't know how to do it. Like, there's still a lot about doing YouTube videos that I need to learn. Like, I don't know how to edit yet. I know how to do some basic editing on YouTube, but there's not a whole lot that you can do, at least that I've found out. So I need editing equipment, which I can't afford, all that kind of stuff. But there's a learning curve, and I'm kind of learning too that God's not supplying some of those things because I'm not ready for them yet, because I have too many other things that I have to learn first. And so he's just supplying them as I'm ready for it, and as I get to the point where I know enough that I could actually use what he supplies. Does that make sense? And is this speaking to you? Because, God calls each of us to do something, not necessarily to do YouTube videos. Maybe there's something else that he's called you to do. Maybe he's called you to pray for somebody in a way that you aren't familiar with or something. Or maybe he's called you to help supply food for people who are in need, but you don't have any money, or you don't know who to go to or whatever, or you don't have space and your church isn't willing to donate space for it or something. There could be all kinds of different things that God's called you to do that you don't know how you're going to be able to do it. And the thing is, in the right time, in the fullness of time, a good Christian catchphrase, in the fullness of time, God's going to provide, because he's going to be faithful to do that which he began in you. And I've usually read that as he'll be faithful to complete the work that he's done on my personality, basically, on who I am as a person, what kind of person I am and stuff. And I never really thought of it in this way before, that he's going to be faithful to complete the ministry that he gives us too. And by ministry, I don't mean just, like public ministry, like teaching. We say people have gone into the ministry, meaning that they're a pastor, but ministry is any way that you're using your gift, your gifts. God gives us gifts, and there's a lot of, I wouldn't say argument, but there's a lot of different interpretations by different theologians about whether we have one gift or we have more gifts or whatever. But whether they're gifts or talents, whatever, that God's given them to you. And if he's given you something, then he wants you to use it. And that's something that's really big with me. If you've known me very long or read very much of my stuff, I am completely convinced that each of us is called to something, and which I think pretty much most Christians would believe. and that God's given us each different experiences. Look at these buttercups. Aren't those pretty? Different experiences, different talents, different traumas, different resources, talents, all those things, gifts. He's given different ones to each of us. And all of that, everything that happens in our life, even if it's quote unquote negative, all of it is stuff that he wants to use, that he wants us to use to serve him. Like the books that I write are pretty much, for the most part, based on truth. Now, they're not exactly my story because I'd probably get sued if I shared exactly who and what has happened to me. And also, like I've said before, I don't believe in hanging out other people's dirty laundry. So I've taken the basic things that have happened to me and I've changed them so that they still have, ooh, there's a spider. I don't like spiders. Come here. Oh, I can't believe I just got him with a, oh, there's another one. Oh, you guys. Oh, I'm going to get him with a leaf. Sorry. I'm so scared of spiders. He's little tiny, so I was able to catch him. And believe me, that took a lot of courage, but my husband's not here for me to call on. I always tell him that what was the point in marrying him if he won't get the spiders for me when he tells me that I should learn to catch them myself. He would be proud of me if he saw this video, but I don't think I'll let him. Because I don't want him to see that I'm capable of catching a little tiny spider, because then he'll want me to catch bigger ones. What was I saying? Oh, you guys, here's my memory problems. Shoot. Oh, I know, talking about my books. So what I've done is I've taken the traumas mainly because I feel really called to people who have suffered and people who are suffering, which really I think is pretty much most of us. But especially those who have suffered in a way that it's traumatized them, and they've been traumatized by things that have happened in their faith walk, like through their church or something like that, or they feel that they've been rejected by the church. Even people who aren't believers yet, but God's calling them, and they feel rejected by the church for various reasons. Those are the people that I feel called to, that God's called me to at this time in my life. And so what I write about is my traumatic experiences and what God has done in my life through those, and what he's taught me through them. But I change them. I change them quite a bit, so that they're really not recognizable or anything like that. And so, because I don't want anybody to be able to read anything that I write and go, oh, this person did that to her. I don't want that. So I really, really do. I don't want you guys trying to guess, because I make it so that there's no way you could guess. But there's a certain range of things that are similar. And so, these traumas that have taken place in my life that have been really hard, and like I've shared, it's like I think I'm probably suffering from PTSD. I haven't gone to a counselor to be diagnosed or anything, but that's kind of what I suspect. Those things have really hurt me, but God is in the business of redemption, not just of redeeming us as people, but also just redeeming everything that happens in our lives. The things that happen that are hard or traumatic or whatever, he uses those things. He uses every single one of them. It's like people call it God's economy, that he doesn't waste anything. He uses everything that happens in our lives. And for a while, many years ago, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, I had been addicted to cutting myself. I cut my arms, mainly. I cut myself a few other places too, but mainly my arms. And so I had joined a group at a church, a group of people who were dealing with addictions. And one of the things that we said that I so agreed with was that we would never wish this on anybody else, and we would never want to go through it again. But you couldn't pay us $1 million to not have had the horrible experiences that we had had, because those experiences had brought us closer to God and had taught us things that helped us as people and also helped us to be able to minister to others. And just want to encourage you, if you're going through something really hard, God's going to use it if you let him. But you have to let him. That's the thing, is he doesn't make you let him use things. But you know what? It feels really good to know that the things that I've been through are helping other people. And so it doesn't feel like I went through this for nothing. It doesn't feel like I wasted my life. I feel like, wow, I went through these things for a purpose, and God knew what that was at the time. And I don't think that God causes those bad things to happen to us. But you know, you have Job who, ooh, there's an earwig in here. You have Job who Satan wanted to test him, and he had to get permission from God. So I'm kind of figuring, okay, that's a biblical principle. We've kind of, I think most theologians agree on that, so I think I'm okay saying that God has to give Satan permission or be okay with something, you know, and also, you know, think of it this way, that God is all powerful. He's what we call omnipotent. Omni is all, potent is power. He's all powerful, and he also is all knowing. The theological word for that is omniscient. Okay, so he's all knowing and he's all powerful. So if he's all knowing and he's all powerful, then he knows ahead of time what's going to happen to me. He knows if something bad is going to happen, and he's powerful enough to stop it, but he chooses not to. All right, and that's a really important thing, is that he chooses not to stop it for whatever reason. And there's tons of reasons. And yes, sometimes it's because it's a consequence, a natural consequence of something that we did, and so now we have to deal with the consequence. But other times it's not. Other times it has nothing to do with punishment or consequences or anything like that. It just has to do with, I guess, where we were at the time, you know, or whatever, but God's choice to allow those things to happen in our lives. And you know what? It's not because he's mean. It's because he wants to use those. And it's not just to use them in our lives, but to use them in other people's lives as well. You know, the things that I've been through, the few things that I've shared so far in my books, have really blessed a lot of people. And I've had people who've written to me who it's really changed their life. And so, I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, because I'm great or anything. I'm saying because look at what God's done. It's just amazing. It's, you know, there was a purpose, there was a reason that he allowed me to go through what I went through. And I'm grateful for that. Like we said, like, you know, in that group that I was in, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, and I wouldn't choose to go through it again, but I'm grateful that I did. I would not give that up because of the experience that I have now of being able to help others because of it. And in some cases, it's simply things like, you know, what it's like to be a single mom. Because, you know, I was a single mom for 10 years, but I grew up in a Christian family, and I read books about marriage since I was in junior high. You know, I was all set up to have a really good marriage. But I ended up being a single mom, and really rejected by the church, rejected by a lot of people, really hurt by people and everything because of it. You guys, you would not believe how hurtful people can be to single moms. I mean, just things that you don't think about, like pastors, very, very well-meaning, I know. And so I'm not saying that they're bad or anything, but it's like on Father's Day, they often will preach about the horrors that can take place to children, especially boys, who grow up without a father. And it's like, my kids didn't need to hear that because it's not like inevitable. And it's just like, you don't need to put that into their minds and make them think that they're going to have all these awful things happen and stuff. But it's like, and of course those pastors are very well meaning, and it doesn't occur to them that, they're trying to express how important it is for those fathers to stay with their families, and I totally agree with that. So anyway, I just stopped taking my kids to church on Father's Day. I can't remember why I was saying this. Oh, anyway, so it's like, so I'm reasonably articulate, and I'm not a single mom anymore. So I'm in the position where I can speak up and let people know what it's like to be a single mom, and to let them know about these things like that we don't think of, that don't occur to us. There's other things that I haven't been through and I haven't experienced, and so I'm sure I do some of the same things, like I just said, the pastors do, without thinking. I probably do something very well-meaning that could really help somebody else, but it hurts someone else. Like, for example, I realized a couple years after writing what is now it will spring forth, but originally was Beauty for Ashes, that because it's a story about a woman who chooses not to have an abortion, it could make women who have abortions and haven't yet found forgiveness for that, it could make them feel really guilty. And so it was important to me, because I realized that after the fact, because yes, when you sin, you're guilty. But there is forgiveness, and a lot of the women who have had an abortion don't realize that. Nobody tells them that, and they're not going to talk to people in church about the fact that they've had an abortion, so they're just not going to find that out. And so I realized I need to write a book that shows somebody having abortion and getting that grace and forgiveness from that. That's just a really, really important thing that I need to do. But it's like it took a couple years before I realized that. So I want to make it clear that I'm not condemning pastors or anything for preaching on this. It's just, how can you be sensitive to everybody in your congregation at once? It's really hard. You can't. So anyway, so part of what God has put on my heart to do, as far as people who aren't those people I was talking about before that are hurt, rejected by the church, and so on, but what He's put on my heart to do for others is to help them to see what it's like to be raped, to be to go through divorce, to be a single mom, all those kinds of things. It's important for me to be able to express that through my stories, so that people can have more of an understanding of that. And yeah, I'm trying to be careful what I say. Anyway, you get my point. God's using those things that I went through. In fact, I think He very specifically allowed me to go through those things so that I could do this, so that I could answer those questions of, well, why does this happen to these women? Why, what is it like? Why do they do this? Well, there's reasons why they do things, and sometimes we cause those unwittingly and well-intentioned, but we cause those. And so that's part of what I want to bring out. That's what part of what I'm called to do, is to help the church understand some of the things that we need to be sensitive about, that we need to be more sensitive about. Probably not all the things that we need to be sensitive about, because I haven't been through everything. And there's things that I'm not sensitive about because I haven't been through them. And so maybe somebody else will write something that will help me to be more sensitive. So anyway, all that coming back to He who began a good work in you. When I was sexually molested when I was 6, God was beginning a good work in me. And I guess I've kind of recognized that for a long time, but I didn't recognize it so specifically. It was more like God, those things happened, and so God turned them around for good. But God knew from the very beginning, and his intention in allowing those things to happen was that he was beginning a good work in me that he's going to be faithful to complete. And he hasn't completed it yet. And I don't even know what the completion looks like. And that's kind of exciting too. And so, and along the way, he's providing the resources, like people that I need to know and talk to find things out. I mean, like, oh my goodness, you guys. Okay, so this book that I'm writing right now about two women who had abortions and how they find grace and forgiveness. There's so much that I don't know about abortion because I've never been through one. And one of my readers wrote to me and asked if she could introduce me to a lady in her church whose son is a pro-life doctor. I was like, sure. Oh my goodness, that's an answer to prayer. This reader had no idea. And so she wrote, and the mom wrote back to me right away, and the son within a few minutes, because I don't know anyway. She must have gotten a hold of her son. And he wrote back to me and said, give me a call sometime. Well, I saw his website. It was incredibly impressive. He bought a practice that included abortion, and he kept the equipment, and he uses that to demonstrate what happens in an abortion. And he does that very, very tastefully. I mean, there's nothing gory about it, but it's the facts, and so he explains.